Thank you for starting the recording. So my name is Karen Spader. We've got a small group with us today, all names that I'm already familiar with. So welcome back, everybody. Today's session topic is the lecturing and alternatives topic. And given our kind of approach to the week was to look toward the horizon at the end of the semester. And so trying to find ways to think about so specific like lecturing and what alternatives we could do to deliver content. What we really kind of ended on was it seemed like this topic ended up being more about AV, right? The audio visual use to deliver information. And so we decided to turn this session's focus into opportunities for projects, presentations, and feedback. Ultimately, what we kind of are implying here is that if the AV was the major theme, what other ways do AV come through in sharing information? And so ultimately we thought projects, presentations, but also offering feedback on student work. So because I know who you all are, and I know you all are good with Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, I'm going to forge ahead. And I'm not sure if all of you were here last week, but in case you weren't, here's a link in the chat to the activity sheet from last week, and for this week it's on the homepage of the Canvas course too. But we put 5 top tips on that activity sheet about lecture and alternatives, ultimately thinking about how we can break down, segment, and make learning material asynchronously available to our students rather than necessarily hosting live sessions to deliver all information. So you're welcome to review those 5 top tips, but I'm kind of pivoting in the moment here just because of what a small group we have and a great opportunity to share whatever it is we might really want to talk about. So as per our usual kind of interactive element of our sessions, I just kind of left this really broad for us today. What topics do you want to discuss? Sure, our theme is opportunities for projects, presentations, and feedback. But you don't have to be stuck in that theme either. If you want to just take a moment and share there, you could indeed share on the activity sheet or in the chat if you had something specific y'all wanted to talk about today. You know what we should all do as remote instructors is download some sort of automatic cricket chirp application. So when we ask and we get silence, we can go chirp, chirp, chirp. Awesome. Nothing in particular. Find these sessions stimulating. Awesome. So do I. Thank you for sharing.
I've also interpreted silence as people are thinking.
True. Very true. Lecture centricness. Ooh, that's a lovely word. Past readiness point. What's next? That's a really, really great question. Oh, I like the Jeopardy theme too, John. That's a great idea. Welcome, Dolores. So I wonder if whoever wrote lecture centricness wouldn't mind speaking up and sharing a little bit more about the implications behind the word.
Hey, that was me. I think that there's this. Well, I've become a little bit familiar with the phrase "sage on a stage," and I think that there's this idea of being a professor as you know, being the font of knowledge, and like everybody comes to them, and you stand up there for 50 to 70 minutes, and people gather around you. And I think that there's a lot of alternatives to that, as well as sort of providing structures for students to develop knowledge, or like guiding towards resources that this provides a big opportunity to, is especially considering the attention spans that everybody has for video and other. I mean, we just can't be engaged in the same way we've been in the same room. It's just not, like I said the other day, like I saw a teacher post that um, the in-person experience is integral to the way they teach, and that, I mean, they didn't say integral to the way they teach. They implied that it was integral to teaching, and I think that that's a myth that could be explored, and maybe find the boundaries of that and see where we can find alternatives or better practices that may carry back, when we get back to the lecture centered, the space where we were, that, how, yeah, that sums up the thought.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. I couldn't agree more with you. I wonder if others want to share their reactions to that. JT?
I think just to be a little contrarian, I think, unfortunately, Theo, I think you're, sort of preaching to the choir, and I think, in my own experience, I think the reason why there is the resistance to adopting or to sort of pigeonholing yourself into the perspective that, it's lecture or bust is, the uncomfortable feeling of being vulnerable in a situation where you're the expert and you have to admit that you are unaware of technologies that could enhance the course. And I don't necessarily think that, lecturing is necessarily bad. I think it can be a good sort of um, experience, but we're fighting against the grain of I don't know exactly what I'm doing. I know my subject very well, but pedagogy is not something that I am necessarily an expert in, and sort of reaching out and admitting that you want to improve sort of underlies the fact that you think that your course, not I want to say insufficient, but there are some weaknesses and you're admitting that. So it's not, I don't know, it's I don't think it's so much against the genre itself so much as it is the risk of the individual.
John, jumping in here, I think that to build on what JT was just talking about. From day one in grad school, you're taught, oh, you need to be the expert in your field. You need to be, that we're building in this level of expertise and the ability to like sort of fight and defend your position. Now all of a sudden you get into a different, and you become that way, right? And that's how you get hired at UW-Madison. You are the top of your field. So now you go into a classroom where you might not have any experience at all, and that it just carries over there. You feel like you're the top, you have to be the top of your field, and nobody can question you. And by nobody questioning you, that means in any way. And it's hard to sort of step away and say, yeah, I'm good at the topic, but not at doing other things than spewing the topic. So we rely on spewing the topic. I'm using spewing, sharing our knowledge in a way that sometimes is very one directional, I guess.
Right. Well, and it's in the name, right? Professor professes. But I think that to JT's point as well, I think I agree with you. You said something, lecture isn't kind of inherently bad, that you think it can be a good experience. And that's a good experience is kind of where I land on that. Yeah, it can be incredibly thought provoking to hear someone share their interpretations, their perspectives, their work. But it is not a prime form of learning. And if, I guess the way I see it in an ideal world, that lectures are something that supplement a broader learning process. Lectures are an opportunity to share the more personal aspect, but learning a body of knowledge, learning to become some kind of professional, which is, you know, a large part of what a college education works toward, right? Developing the skills to fit into some kind of profession, whether it's a scientific profession or otherwise. It's about learning to become that. And so just sitting there and listening to statement of material is not the best way to achieve that.
I agree 100%. I think it's it can be a useful activity, but as a central component to the course, I don't know if I would push anyone in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Tom.
And I just saw that Juan posted about thinking of different kinds of lecturing. Juan, if you're willing to come on and talk a little bit about what different kinds of lecturing you do, some of those concrete examples might be helpful here.
Hi, sure. Well, I teach a large lecture course based on culture, so to give you the concrete background, and it's always uh, 1/3 of okay, this is the information I have to clarify for you guys because maybe you didn't get it, it's in Spanish and it's a lot of stuff, but then the rest of the lecture is basically questions, and there is a section that is called things that make you go and it's a reference to a to a song. But anyway, and it's just basically offering questions and more questions and critical thinking. Now, in the transition to this online mode, I found even more liberating to do narrative presentations. They could be shorter. They stop they stop always with a question, and then they have to do the research or they have to do some reflection. So I mean, the format itself, uh, the format lends itself more to just making more kind of fragmentary and stop and let them continue. And I keep on just keeping sections in which they have to make connections. When the lecture stops, I mean, the thinking for them begins. I mean, I don't know if that's clear enough or concrete enough.
Mhm. So what I really heard there is, there's on the one hand, there's the delivery of information lecture, and on the other hand, there is a clarification kind of lecture, as well as a prompting critical thought and or introspection kind of way to lecture. Absolutely, I'm seeing those. JT, go ahead.
Thanks, Juan. I was going to say, I really appreciated your perspective saying that the narrated PowerPoint is very liberating for you. And I was wondering if you could describe that sensation of being free a little bit more. What does that mean for you? How has that helped you adjust to the online environment?
Well, I have the advantage that this has been a kind of a blended experience. I mean, we had the face-to-face at the beginning of the semester, and now it's online. So I'm drawing from all that personal contact I have with them. I include some references to the things I said in lecture. I actually recorded the lecture so I can use I can just use some footage from what I said and do some kind of flashbacks in there. Uh, uh, I can use I'm using Kaltura once in a while to just make the presentation stop, and there is a question that again is a thinking question. I'm using music and film clips that again in my face-to-face lecturing I did the explaining, or I mean it was they couldn't participate in such a big lecture, and they don't because it's in Spanish, so it is even another obstacle. But now I can let the every single material that is a film clip or a piece of music or a painting, I can stop at some point and let them again continue. So it's liberating in the sense that I can just again keep on asking questions and asking questions and asking questions instead of feeling that I need to lecture in the way I did for 50 minutes twice a week. I don't know if that clarifies a little bit more my sense of liberation.
Louis, go ahead.
I wanted to throw out there that I also gave a link on things you can do besides lecture. And I think it was, if you scroll up probably to find it.
So yeah, happy that you're here. I'm sorry it's at such a terrible time. All right, thank you. Yes. And yes, Juan, to your point, yes, I do think that that helps a lot, and you've really shared a lot of really great ideas. Sounds pretty awesome what you're doing, so thank you. Other thoughts on this topic of kind of, I guess, what did we come up with? Lecture centricness, lecture centricity, lecten.
Lexcentrification, lexcentricity, yeah.
Thank you. Oh, okay. So hypothetical, I'm an instructor and I'm past the readiness point. What's next? Um, I I think this is an excellent hypothetical to consider. Um, Theo says very creative, takes a little extra effort, but seems well worth it. I don't disagree. You know, I think for me, I wanted to add one of the ways that I interpret this discussion, um, or rather, maybe it's how I see why people have different approaches to this topic, to this debate, maybe. And I think it's about both how we see our work, our jobs, as well as how our jobs are defined for us. And I think that it's important to recognize that there is both implicitly and quite frankly explicitly the expectation that teaching is the secondary to research. And so to some extent we have to recognize that that's part of the discussion and part of the reason why people do what they do, more or less for better or for worse. So I mean nothing to, except for it's part of the reality, to bring that up. And that being said, I'm also the kind of person who believes in doing my best work wherever I'm doing work. So perhaps I'm a little more inclined to feel that people should do more, because of that's being who I am. So anyway, just pointing out my own bias there, I suppose. Students really expect lectures as well, Theo. That is a really great point. I have heard that from so many students, that they think that that's what good education looks like. And then that adds on to our plate as instructors too, and as educators. Is it not our job to um, teach our students, right? I mean, isn't that what it comes down to? Even if they expect that and they think that's what's good, it isn't necessarily. And so, to put it bluntly, too bad. And John says it's what they feel they are buying. Yeah, good point, especially in lower level foreign language courses. Thanks, JT, who would have thought grammar lectures were a hot seller. Maybe you can explain that more. I'm not sure what a grammar lecture as a hot seller looks like.
Yeah, so similar to this, I mean, it's in high school courses, I think it's mainly just here are the grammatical structures of a foreign language. In my own French teaching experience, this is something that I've encountered. You just want to know what are the rules, give me the test, versus practical applications of using the language. And you've, in theory, studied some, you've familiarized yourself with some of these rules at home. So it's sort of, on the instructional side, you sort of face that challenge to actually active learning by students who just want, to be a repository of information.
Yeah.
And that's reflected, and in the 7 years that I've been here, semester in, semester out, it's in the evaluations. You want, just give me the rule and teach me that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think what this is uncovering is it's a systemic issue, right? I mean, the bottom line is uh, it's not just about instructors learning better pedagogy. It's not just that. That's not it. As Theo points out, there's a lot of resistance to overcome, both from the student perspective, from the systems perspective, how we're evaluated. all of those things. The pressure to meet numbers, for lack of a better term. So I don't know. There is no answer, but I'm loving that we're having this conversation. Um, I started to address this. I'm an instructor and I'm past the readiness point, but didn't really get to that. So I think this is a question that's on a lot of people's minds. Certainly from my perspective, where I'm at, and what do we do next? How do we continue to support people? John Martin, go ahead.
And we've been talking about that both at the lab design, and I just got an email from JT about this. We have been adjusting. That first week we were remote readiness labs, and then we heard from the Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning, all right, we're now in the support phase, so now we are the remote support phase, support labs. And I think that the next step, if I'm hearing the question right, is, hey, I've got summer courses to plan, or hey, I've got fall courses to plan. How can we adopt? And I think that we're ready to go into the almost ready to evolve or shift into the what's next, the course design phase. So we were able to do remote teaching and shift very quickly on into teaching remotely, but we've got fall courses to start thinking about, and this is about the time that people are starting to think about those things. What can we do to, at this level in these types of conversations to support people as they are designing their new courses? And
Yeah.
wondering if other people have thoughts on that suggestion or observation. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it sort of responds to the conversation that Theo broached a few minutes ago about faculty being self-reflective about themselves, what did and did not work well, but also engaging with their students and saying what types of activities, what methods of presentation, what features of the course need improvement. And it may be a pride pill that you have to swallow, but sort of, I think that's the first, I don't know, to me, it seems that would be the first step. And then improving from there. I'm not sure, if obviously if you were anticipating teaching a face-to-face course in the fall, you maybe have a little bit more work to do now that you're officially teaching an online course. And I think this was brought up maybe yesterday or the day before in one of the labs. I think it was Lindy Stoll, that even though they're expecting a face-to-face, they enrolled in a face-to-face course for the summer, it's now going to be online. What types of adjustments and negotiations do students need to make, and also instructors? So I think there's unfortunately more questions than just sort of a out the gates running type thing that needs to occur.
Thomas.
And to piggyback on what JT is saying, I'm curious to hear everybody who's in this session as a participant. What are your summer loads like usually? What are your fall plans for the teaching that you're doing? Because we do have some online courses, fully online. They've been developed over months. They've been, faculty members have been working with instructional designers to put them together. And that's not what we're aiming for these summer courses. We're still aiming for remote instruction. Maybe a little better designed, maybe a few more left and right boundaries to what the course looks like. And those are conversations that are happening in everybody's departments now, but they're also happening at the system level for the entire university as well. And that's still being put together right now about what those considerations need to be in order to be well prepared to teach a remote course for the summer. So I'm curious. I want to open up the conversation a little bit and just ask, what does your summer look like? what are the things that you have on your plate that you're thinking about? Oh, I need to think about designing or doing, or how am I going to teach? Hey, Juan.
Hi, I was scheduled to teach in the summer an online course on culture and the city. It's culture, Spanish culture through 5 Spanish cities, and I did it last summer already. So I was ready. I had some experience. I took the courses, the 2 courses on online and blended. So I think I'm ready, and this experience and these labs and all this information and new ideas are gonna help me to improve that course, and that's why I like to. I mean, addressing the question of readiness point and then what. For me, just keep on listening to people, what they do, the ideas. It helps me to improve this new way of teaching for me. I have to say that my department has gone online for all the courses, including the courses that were scheduled face to face, and that's a little bit more of a problem. They are not going to increase the enrollment limit because those instructors didn't sign up for having 70 students like I may have, and it's going to create like in this semester some problems of adjusting. In my case, I have the experience and I was ready, and everything that happened this semester is gonna improve the offering that I already planned. Over.
Juan, you are an exceptional person because you've gone through the Teach Online, you've gone through all of this, and you're coming to these sessions. What advice would you give to us to help the faculty who aren't coming to all these opportunities to help take them to the next stage? You've seen what your colleagues and others are doing. Is there anything you would recommend to help some of the people who aren't able to or haven't been able to take care of it, but take advantage of these? What would you recommend to have us help those people?
Well, all the information about the know-how and the resources and the examples of courses. I mean, the weekly rhythms. I mean, those are invaluable pieces of information. But for me, the key, in my case, not as much, but with other colleagues that I talk in the corridors, is to transmit enthusiasm about this modality, because people are doing this reluctantly, and I have colleagues telling me, "Oh, I have to teach in the summer," and either I teach online or I don't teach at all, and that's kind of the wrong attitude, because for me it was, I mean, all the courses I'm taking and the workshops are just communicating the enthusiasm for this modality in which I don't have experience, but I'm not going to enter this mode of teaching thinking, oh, this is the second best thing I can do in a classroom. I mean, I'm going to try to match that kind of pedagogical enthusiasm I had from the beginning. So in everything I've done, in again workshops, courses, I mean that enthusiasm has been there, and it's for me the key, apart from all the very helpful resources. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you very much for sharing. Anyone else on the line have comments on that or thoughts? Dustin or Hazel?
I won't teaching, not teaching this summer, so I won't re-comment.
Okay. Hazel, did you have any thoughts?
I think the foundational point that Juan is making about how do we center learning as opposed to teaching, and teaching as a resource that facilitates learning, so that one is not leaning into this thing, this set of conditions that is pushing everyone to do things such that it's thought to be second best. So to reframe it in terms of what is going to help the students that I have in my classroom learn their best, become their best learners, and because it's not what's taught, it's what's caught and taken away. And if we can, and I know this is a research-centered university, however, but for students, none of us would be here. So if they walked tomorrow, I don't care how many honors and awards you have, this place was shut down. It's not a think tank. And so this is an opportunity for us to get clearer about why we're here foundationally and how to frame it in terms of this will facilitate learning. And I think how do we communicate that and build enthusiasm, as Juan mentioned, for this as a resource that's foundational in the toolkit for pedagogy and sharing, not just to teach, but for the learning.
That's very well said, Hazel. And what I always like to tell people, it isn't the modality, whether you're teaching face-to-face, online, blended. It's not the modality, it's really the thoughtful planning, facilitation, and based on what you two are saying, and also the caring for the student learning and their experience that really makes the teaching better. So they, instead of focusing on the modality, I agree, I wish we had focused on the things that both you and Juan have said. So thank you. Tom?
And Hazel, you're bringing up something that gets me out of the theoretical and into the very practical. One of the challenges that we're going to see over the summer is that our students are going to be on their mobile devices, or many of our students don't have a laptop or a desktop, or if they do, they're going to be fighting for time on it because they have to go to work using that device. Their children are going to be learning and studying using that device, and they're also going to have lots of other demands on their time. So when we're thinking about lecture and alternatives to lecture, it's really kind of a time management question based on what you've been saying. And the question I'd love to pose is, what's one thing that you identify right now that your students are telling you is a barrier, and what's one way that you can think about how you give them the information, like lecturing or in other ways, that would help to address those barriers? Where do your students already tell you, hey, we have this problem, or could you change because there's this gap or this challenge?
Hi, I have a very concrete example that kind of baffled me a little bit, and is that when I switched this semester to online teaching, I immediately went to a weekly rhythm in which modules were overlapping, and they can work at their own pace. Well, I have problems with the students not understanding that the mindset was, okay, I have class Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and it was right now in the third week, someone is telling me, oh, I think I'm beginning to catch what we are supposed to do. I'm beginning to understand this new schedule, and it was my mistake, maybe assuming that they were going to understand what it took me a little, and now I've forgotten that it took me a little while also to say, oh, I have to visualize this in a different way, and then to have to make, again, overlapping modules and allow people who work faster and slower, and my students intellectually didn't make that transition at the beginning. So the first week they were a little bit lost with my schedule, and I wasn't clear enough.
Sure, yeah, I think that's a really good point to make, and one that is going to be really important, excuse me, both as we wrap up the semester, but as also with having remote courses over the summer as well, making sure that students understand what the comparison is, right? Okay, so this is what we typically do in class, and this is how it's going to transition. And so I think that clarity is a really great point to make, one, that we can't assume that our students will be with it right away. So thanks for sharing that. It's an excellent example.
I think that this is John jumping in. The other thing is checking in. Like, um, it, the students alerted you to it, but how can we like just catch it as fast as we can and address it? Like, what are what are our feelers that we sort of put out into the class so that they so that we can keep abreast with what is what they're thinking, what they're not thinking. Are they engaged? Are they not engaged? Are they following along, or are they lost, or are they happily traipsing down some other path that I don't want them to go down, or that is useless for them? And how do I round them back up? So yesterday we talked about feedback, and today we're talking about feedback. How can we both give feedback, but also how can we get feedback from our students? And that requires a lot of questions, and Juan, I remember you talking about this the other day, building those questions into the assignments themselves. So if you're not hearing anything, if they're not turning those assignments in, well, that's a clue, right? Not necessarily survey, but informal ways of asking, what are some of the other options that we can have to do that, to stay abreast and stay alert of what's happening in their brains.
I think also trying to facilitate students having agency in the sense of now using assessment and evaluation as learning and not just for and of learning. So using assessment and evaluation and feedback is one form, but some way of helping them be partners in dynamically assessing and evaluating what it is they're learning and how they can best partner with the teacher, quote unquote, or with the person who is sharing the knowledge in order for that to occur. So it's not always after the fact, it's going upstream and instream with the teaching and the learning process.
So Hazel, to follow up or ask you a question on that, you're talking about getting them involved in rubrics, getting them involved in, hey, what is it that you want to talk about with this subject that will be useful to you or connect to your lives?
It can be rubrics, and that's a more formalized version, but it's more engaging and learning as a dynamic process where they have some agency. I sent you that graphic where our focus often is on assessing and evaluation to what extent and in what ways learning has occurred. That's a post-mortem and an autopsy, whether it's
Right.
formative or summative. The other branch is assessment and evaluation as learning, where we're trying to activate and fuel the learner as an active agent, architect, and partner in the learning process itself. Alverno College is the one who actually pioneered in this area, but the folks up in Canada, Lorna Earle, really differentiated this assessment and evaluation as learning, for learning, and of learning. And I think we need to focus a bit more, not a bit more, a whole lot more on that as, because that's not a post-mortem, that's going in stream and upstream and not just downstream doing the, to what extent has learning occurred or is it occurring?
Hazel, can I share the box links that you sent me in the chat here?
Yes.
Great. All right. Well, are there any other questions that we want to jump into? We have about 4 minutes left in the recording.
Just as a suggestion, I shared the guiding questions that we have on the activity sheet, but don't feel too pressured, but we're here to talk about what you want to talk about. Yeah, no, that's okay, Theo. So was I. I have to say, I think today was a really great discussion. We talked about some heavy ideas that I know weigh heavily on me pretty much all the time. Um, so I'm really happy to have had that conversation with you. Excuse me. Dustin, go ahead.
Yes, I've been involved in teaching languages, and I was wondering about best effective method, for example, teaching, say, a beginner foreign language course. And we try to have a student-centered classroom, which is and have the students interact with one another and form little groups. And then the teacher usually is a guide and models certain structures, for example, and vocabulary, and then has the students maybe practice that with one another so that they get to practice the language as much as possible in a student-centered classroom. So I wondered what kind of platforms are available that could mimic that in a remote environment.
JT, go ahead. Yeah, I know you're foreign language knowledgeable.
Hi, Dustin. I'm coming to you from the Department of French and Italian, and do it, I suppose. I know that introductory foreign languages and French and Italian are both being taught through Blackboard Collaborate. So it's a very similar structure to what it would be in the face-to-face environment using breakout groups and sort of, document sharing, etc. So Blackboard has had some good success with that. If you would want to reach out to Heather Allen in French and Italian just to see how she's coordinating those early level courses, that might be a good resource for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're at 11 o'clock.
Did I don't know, maybe did anybody see my comments in the chat? John or JT, do you have any idea about language learning games and where those are?
Duolingo is really good. They've been doing a lot of improvements, and they also have now like a classroom dashboard, whereas you can create a classroom as a teacher and assign different activities and different levels of activities to students. I'm sure I would tread on water or on broken glass if I said this was an unsupported tool, but it is. It's really awesome. I've enjoyed using it, but in terms of developing speaking skills, it's not ideal. But
So it's more about learning the vocabulary in that case.
yeah, learning vocabulary. Duolingo is free on one.
Okay.
And you can use a sort of web browser portal for it, and then also download it for an iPhone or Android. I don't think there's a desktop app, but it's pretty awesome.
I suppose I just kind of trying to think of alternatives to a static, non-interactive textbook, for example, especially as we're seeking out, alternatives for remote supported learning. Tom, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, Dustin, I appreciate the question, and I've taught Spanish for a couple of years there, and I can't say enough about just the general shift for engagement. So asking your students to engage with real resources. If there's a newspaper in the language that has a website, ask them to be reading it and then conversing about it in textual ways or in short video ways or short audio ways. And you can use the learning management system of Canvas as a mediating tool for the kinds of conversations that you would ordinarily have in a face-to-face way. I've put into the chat the instructional continuity websites page on transitioning course activities. There is a section in there on activities and engagements. And some of those general strategies work really well for language learning courses as well. So I'd encourage you, when you have a couple of seconds, please take a look at those as well.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, well, I think we'll go ahead and officially end the recording. Karen, if